Have you ever noticed how some people seem completely unshakable? They don't fall for emotional traps. They don't get pulled into pointless arguments. They don't cave under pressure. While others around them spiral into drama, these individuals remain centered, calm, and surprisingly difficult to influence. It's not luck. It's not genetics, and it's definitely not because they are emotionally cold or disconnected. It comes down to habits. Small, almost invisible habits that create an invisible shield around their mental space. Today, we're exploring 9 subtle habits that make certain people nearly impossible to manipulate. These aren't grand gestures or dramatic changes. They're quiet practices that reshape how you respond to pressure, how you handle emotional games, and how you protect your inner world from those who would try to control it. Let's dive in. 1. They master the art of strategic observation. Most people react first and think later. But manipulation-resistant individuals have flipped this script entirely. When someone tries to push their buttons, they don't immediately respond. Instead, they shift into a different mode altogether. They become observers, watching the interaction like they're studying a chess match. They notice everything. The slight changes in someone's voice when they're being dishonest, the way certain people suddenly become overly friendly when they need something. The patterns of behavior that repeat themselves in relationships and conversations. This isn't paranoia or overthinking, it's conscious awareness. While most people feel uncomfortable silences with words, these individuals use silence as their greatest tool. They understand that reactions give away information, and manipulators feed on information, so they reveal very little. They speak only after they've processed what's really happening beneath the surface. 2, they never chase understanding from others. Here's something fascinating about people who are hard to manipulate. They explain themselves once, clearly and completely, and then they stop. They don't repeat their thoughts 5 different ways, hoping someone will finally get it. They don't shrink their message to make others more comfortable. And they definitely don't waste energy trying to convince someone who's pretending not to understand. This behavior comes from deep internal security. They know what they mean and what they stand for, regardless of whether others choose to acknowledge it. When you stop chasing someone else's understanding, you stop giving them power over your emotions. You stop feeding their need to make you work harder for their approval. Over-explaining often stems from past experiences where you had to defend yourself repeatedly. But these individuals have broken that pattern. They understand that their boundaries speak louder than any explanation ever could. 3, they create space between trigger and response. Most manipulation tactics rely on one simple strategy, getting you to react emotionally before you can think clearly. But people who are difficult to control have trained themselves to pause. Even a brief moment between what happens and how they respond creates a psychological buffer that changes everything. They've developed techniques that help them stay grounded. Deep breathing that calms their nervous system. Internal labeling of emotions that creates distance from intense feelings. Grounding exercises that bring them back to the present moment. They ask themselves questions like, what is this person really trying to accomplish here? This is emotional regulation in practice. The ability to steer your feelings instead of being hijacked by them. When you don't give someone the emotional reaction they're fishing for, their strategy completely falls apart. The drama loses its fuel. The power dynamic resets itself. Their calmness becomes their greatest strength. 4, they choose people instead of chasing them. Emotionally secure individuals understand something profound about relationships. Healthy connections don't require pursuit. They don't try to force bonds with people who aren't equally invested. They don't exhaust themselves trying to fix others or convince anyone to stick around. This mindset flows from secure attachment, where your sense of worth isn't tied to someone else's presence or absence. When someone starts pulling away or playing games, they don't panic. Instead, they evaluate. They look at the consistency of the relationship, the level of respect being shown, and the overall emotional health of the connection. If the energy isn't mutual, they step back without anger, without resentment, and without creating unnecessary drama. Their peace of mind holds more value than someone's inconsistent attention. When you stop chasing people, you automatically stop giving them power over your emotional state. You become someone who attracts rather than pursues, who evaluates rather than assumes, and who chooses connections based on substance rather than potential. 5, they trust actions over apologies. People can say absolutely anything, but their habits always reveal the truth. Individuals who resist manipulation have learned to judge trustworthiness through patterns, especially long-term patterns of behavior. They pay attention to how someone acts when they're stressed, when they're corrected, when they don't get their way, or when they think nobody's watching. They've learned about something psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. This happens when someone treats you poorly, then follows up with an intense apology or grand gesture, only to repeat the same harmful behavior later. This cycle creates emotional confusion and dependency because your brain gets hooked on the unpredictable rewards, but manipulation-resistant people don't fall for this pattern. They compare every promise to the established pattern and choose the pattern every single time. If the apology sounds beautiful but the behavior stays unchanged, they treat it as information about that person's character, not evidence of real transformation. You simply cannot manipulate someone who makes decisions based on evidence instead of emotions, who watches what people do rather than getting swept away by what they say. 6, they guard their energy like a precious resource. Think about how athletes manage their physical energy. They're strategic about when to push hard and when to conserve strength. People who are difficult to manipulate treat their mental and emotional energy with the same level of intention and awareness. They recognize when a conversation is draining them. They notice when a relationship feels completely one-sided. They can sense when a situation is slowly wearing down their peace of mind. And here's the key difference. They respond to these warning signs early before significant damage occurs. They'll walk away from people who consistently bring chaos, conflict, or confusion into their lives. They understand the crucial difference between genuinely helping someone and being emotionally used by someone. This isn't selfishness or coldness. This is emotional hygiene, maintaining a clean and healthy environment for their mind. They operate by a simple but powerful rule. If it costs them their peace, it's too expensive. Because they're willing to walk away when necessary, manipulators lose their strongest form of leverage. 7. They use strategic silence for understanding. Silence is one of the most misunderstood behaviors of emotionally strong people. It's not passive aggression. It's not a power game. It's not emotional withdrawal. It's a diagnostic tool that reveals incredible amounts of information. When they stop responding, they watch carefully. Who respects their need for space? Who becomes defensive or aggressive? Who reveals their true intentions when they're not getting immediate attention? Silence removes emotional noise and creates the distance needed to see patterns clearly. It helps them analyze relationships without pressure, manipulation, or emotional fog clouding their judgment. 8. They never defend against false accusations. Here's where most people get trapped. Someone makes an accusation that isn't true, and the natural instinct is to defend yourself immediately and vigorously. But people who resist manipulation understand something counterintuitive. Defending against false accusations often makes you look guilty, even when you're completely innocent. Instead, they respond with calm curiosity. They might say something like, "That's an interesting perspective. What makes you think that?" This approach does two things. It puts the burden of proof back on the accuser, and it reveals whether the accusation was genuine concern or manipulative testing. They understand that people who truly care about the truth will appreciate this thoughtful response. People who are trying to manipulate will often become frustrated because their tactic failed. Their refusal to take the bait exposes the real intention behind the accusation. 9. They separate their worth from others' opinions. This final habit might be the most powerful of all. People who are nearly impossible to manipulate have developed an internal sense of worth that doesn't fluctuate based on external validation. They don't need everyone to like them. They don't need constant approval. They don't measure their value by how others treat them. This doesn't mean they're arrogant or disconnected. They still care about relationships and feedback, but they've learned to filter input through their own values and self-knowledge. They can receive criticism without crumbling. They can handle rejection without questioning their entire identity. They can stand firm in their principles even when it's unpopular. When your self-worth is internally generated rather than externally dependent, manipulation loses its power. People can't threaten to withdraw their approval because you're not desperately seeking it. They can't make you feel small because your sense of size comes from within. These 9 habits work together to create something remarkable. Not a cold, disconnected person, but someone who engages with the world from a place of strength rather than need. Someone who builds relationships based on mutual respect rather than emotional dependency. Someone who responds to life rather than simply reacting to it. The beautiful thing about these habits is that they're learnable. They're not personality traits you're born with or without. They're skills you can develop through conscious practice and self-awareness. Start with just one habit that resonates with you. Notice when you have opportunities to practice it. Be patient with yourself as you build these new patterns. True strength isn't about controlling others. It's about not letting others control you. When you master these subtle habits, you'll find that manipulation attempts simply bounce off you. Your relationships become healthier. Your stress decreases. Your confidence grows naturally. You become someone who attracts genuine connections while effortlessly repelling those who would try to use you.